Hey guys, even here with the old school apps, and the last time I mentioned this topic, Heath versus Brandon Curry, I noticed a couple of people in the comment section saying that they would prefer to see a pose for pose comparison. So we're gonna do that right now. And first we're gonna start, this is not really a pose, this is just a front relaxed pose, I guess. Yeah, it's a pose, but it's not a mandatory pose. And this is just how a lineup starts. This is what bodybuilders do when they're not hitting a pose. But of course, they're not really relaxed. It's just the name of the pose. It's not an official pose, but you are standing there also flexed. Anyways, before we start this comparison, I have a couple of things I wanted to say before we do that. So, it's interesting what Brandon Curry said in his interview with Fouad Abiad. He said that he doubts Phil's motivation for doing this contest. So, we don't know if Phil is actually doing it because he wants to finish the business, like he says. Because he has unfinished business, because he really wants that 8th title to tie the record with Ronnie and Lee Haney. Maybe he's doing this because he wants to promote his name. Atleticon is not happening this year. Danny Garcia is not going to see him doing her show, so they probably decided together that it is a good time to do another Mr. Olympia this year. There is that. I'm sure that actually happened, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't want that 8th sandal. There is also another thing. This is the year of pandemic, and this year is messed up through and through. So I'm sure he's a little bit bored. He doesn't have a lot of things to do, so why not start a prep? And also, there is not 100% certainty that Mr. Olympia is going to happen. There are some people saying that it might not happen. So maybe he's just going to hype himself up, and if they cancel it, he doesn't have to go through another hard prep. And right now he is getting exposure, which is good for his name, for his brand. So we don't know what his true motivations are, but let's try and put that aside. Let's assume that Phil is not gonna come at his best like he was in 2011, 12 or 13, not even 14, 15, 16 or even 17, but with his last year's version, last time he competed actually 2018 version, which is his worst. And he doesn't think that this was a bad version of him. He thinks he did his homework. And you can say that he did do that, but there are some things that really made his physique look not so good, and that is the descended stomach. But he said that he had time to heal after that hernia surgery. And basically he's saying that he is healed right now and that he was sort of ill at the Mr. Olympia 2018. So if that's true, he's gonna come improved in that region or in that sense. As far as his stomach, he's gonna look better. But other than that, everything else, I'm sure he still holds on to a lot of muscle and that he still has the maturity and he can still come conditioned. So I think we can see a similar physique in 2018. Yeah, I think it's gonna be pretty similar to that. Maybe a little bit flatter and smaller, but with a smaller waist. I believe he's gonna work on that. Anyways, we don't know that, but we can only assume. And what better version to compare against Brandon Curry than Phil's last 2018? As far as Brandon Curry, I took his Mr. Olympia version, the last one. Even though I think 2019 Arnold Classic version of Brandon is his best, we're gonna still use his last edition, just like we're doing with Phil Heath. What about the height ratio? Well, here you can see that Brandon is not really a tall guy. I mean, he's a little bit taller than Bonek, and Bonek is a really short guy. And you can see right here that Sean is standing next to Bonek, and he's looking much taller, and he's about the same height as Phil, maybe a little tiny bit taller, but almost the same height. And Brandon is only a little bit taller than Bonek, so you can see that Phil is taller than Brandon actually. Even though Brandon does have that imposing physique, and he seems to be a bigger guy, he's actually pretty short. So I'm gonna try to make the ratio as good as I can. Alright, back to the front relaxed. Legs, Phil all day. I mean, this is gonna be the thing with every front pose. Phil is absolutely killing Brandon in this department. I mean, he has the size, he has the fullness, he has that granity look, the matured look, veins and hard look. Much better than Brandon. He doesn't have the separation, the striations, he doesn't have the hard, the granity look or the details. Or the pop or the sweep. Look at how much Phil's lateral head is just popping. I'm sure explanation is not needed. I'm sure everybody can see that Phil has much better legs. Waist. Brandon has smaller waist. Abs. Brandon has nicer, prettier abs, right? More symmetrical, nicer, smaller, and complete. Phil has a 4-pack that looks weird, and a belly button that is popping out too much, and his waist is not as tight, not as small. And his shoulders are a little bit narrow. This was Phil's weakness always, and with this wider waist, they appear to be even more narrow. Now, Brandon, he looks really wide, and his legs are smaller, so it makes his entire upper body look more impressive than his lower body. And as far as arms, both of these guys have great arms. Shoulders, I would give it to Brandon. Chest, you can go either way, basically. Phil has the thickness, but Brandon has the width. He has a wide chest. Phil's chest is a little bit narrow, but he has the thickness. And overall, this pose, I mean, it's really close. I can't really make my mind. It's really close, but just because of the stomach, I would go with Brandon, but because of the legs, I would go with Phil. So let's say this one is a draw. Not only with the legs, but Phil has that maturity all over his physique. He just looks harder. Now here again, same thing with the legs. Phil's legs are looking much better, but waist much wider, narrow shoulders, looking super tight upstairs, can't really open and spread this pose wide like Brandon is doing it. Brandon has a beautiful flow, and even though his legs are just much worse, overall his physique in this pose looks just better. Even though he's not as hard, he's softer, he has small legs. Because of that waist and that belly and the stomach, the bubble gut, if you will, Brandon takes this one in my opinion. Side chest. Now this is a good pose for Brandon. Why? Because you cannot see that his legs are small. From the side, his legs look really good, really complete. But it's also a pretty good pose for Phil because you cannot really see as much of a bubble gut. And you can see the super crazy thickness, the conditioning in his pecs, in his arms, in his delts, and also you can see the straightened glutes. So this one is close. Both of these guys are doing it really well, but because of the maturity and the overall completeness, the development, I would go with Phil with this one, even though it's really close, but you cannot see Phil's bubble gut, and that is the only reason why Brandon can be considered a winner in this comparison, just because of the bubble gut. So this time around, you cannot really see it, and it's pretty good for Brandon as well. It's really close pose. I would rather go with Phil. Inside tricep, your arms are behind you, so you cannot really hide your belly. However, Brandon can hide his small legs, and in this pose, they look pretty decent. They look good, they look big, right? But Phil cannot hide his stomach. I mean, it looks like a mess. Yeah, Phil has thicker triceps, crazy looking triceps, look at that pop, and overall more granity, the matured look, the striations in the glutes and hamstrings because of the stomach. I mean, look at Brandon's midsection, just flat, just beautiful. I will give this one to Brandon because it flows much better. In his posing routine 2019 Mr. Olympia, Brandon didn't hit front lat spread. I don't know what is the reason for that, but I couldn't find a proper photo of himself doing that pose at Mr. Olympia. I found it from the Arnold Classic from the same year, and you can see why I said before that he looked better at this show. He was fuller and more conditioned. He was just looking insane. And he looks really good. You cannot even see that his legs are small. They looked full. They looked really big at the Arnold Classic. Phil Heath, yeah, he has better legs. He has more maturity and that grainy look, but look at the shoulders, super tight. The chest also, not very good. Arms are big, but Brandon's are bigger, and the stomach a mess, while Brandon's stomach is spot on. The only reason why I'm considering Phil here is legs, but I cannot give it to him. I give this one to Brandon as well. This pose is called abs and thighs, so it's not only about the abs, it's about the thighs as well, and you can notice that Phil's thighs are looking far superior than Brandon's. It's not even funny right here. I mean, this is just a complete different level. And Brandon was a bit watery, fluffy at the Mr. Olympia, so for that reason his stomach didn't look that good. At the Arnold's, his abs looked really good in this pose. Here, you cannot really see any separation. You can see more separation at Phil's, but I mean, there is pretty much almost no difference in width from his waist to his shoulders. Like, it's pretty much all flat. There is no V-taper. And that looks pretty nasty. That doesn't look very good, not very aesthetic. And the stomach, I said nasty because I was looking at his stomach. it's pretty ugly, right? It really draws your attention. And how can I give this pose to Phil? Come on. It all goes to say, Phil comes with this stomach again looking like this, which is most likely the case. He's gonna have a hard time taking that sando back, you know? It's gonna be hard taking it away from Brandon. Because of the stomach. Because the stomach. This one, I can't really decide. I mean, yeah, the stomach is a huge minus for Phil, but Brandon's legs also huge minus for him. So I guess this one is also a draw. Now we come to the back poses, and these poses are good for Phil because he can hide his stomach. He cannot hide the waist that got bigger. I mean, you can see right here, he was known for having super small waist from behind. It's not the case anymore. It is the case with Brandon, but back, Brandon has great back, but not as great as Phil's. And even though his V-taper maybe is slightly better, it's still not as thick as Phil's. And then lower body, like not even close, night and day difference. The size of the glutes, the striations in the glutes, the striations in the hamstrings. This is like Phil's hamstrings, some of the best hamstrings ever, maybe the best hamstrings. Calves as well, the size of the legs, the lateral head of the quadriceps popping like that, much better. I give this one to Phil easy. Back lat spread, pretty much the same story. Like Brandon has good back, good V-taper and everything, but not as thick as Phil's back, and like lower body, Phil absolutely destroys him. So this one goes to Phil, no doubt about that. And finally, we get to the most muscular pose, which is a really good pose for both of these guys because they are both arm dominant. And even though Phil's stomach is a mess, you cannot really notice it too much because of the craziness that is going on everywhere on his body right here. The delts are popping, the arms, the forearms, the quads, and everything. I mean, Brandon is great, but not as insanely freaky looking as Phil. So I give this one to Phil as well. So I think we came to a conclusion that Phil is actually, gonna do what I said he's gonna do originally. Win that 8 sando, take it away from Brandon. I mean, Sean was much closer than Brandon is, to be honest. And there were people, myself included, who compared Sean against Phil. And there were some arguments that Phil should have won that show, but it didn't happen. So, I mean, these comparisons for YouTube, you're gonna feel right now like I wasted your time, but they are not accurate. And I'm sure you knew this when you watched it. But let's interact, guys. Tell me down below whatever you think. But based on what I saw right here, I think, it's not going to be super easy for Phil. It's not going to be a cakewalk. It's going to be hard, to beat Brandon because of that belly. But if he fixes it a little, and if he comes in his usual shape, 2018, which is his worst, if he comes like this, I think he's going to win it. I think he's going to take that 8 sando and maybe win a couple of more after that. Whatever you guys think, tell me down below in the comment section. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like it. If you want to see more, subscribe to this channel. All the best, guys, and keep it old school.